Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here today to celebrate Second Pennsylvania Native Species Day. My name is Chris Abel. I'm the coordinator for the Governor's Invasive Species Council. The council, if you're not aware, it consists of 7 state agencies and 14 organizations, all representing agriculture, academia, local government, and conservation. The council's mission is to help protect our health, the health of our economy and environment, from the threat of invasive species. We are here today in partial fulfillment of that mission to raise awareness of the vital importance of native species and how they are threatened by invasive species. We have leaders here today from agencies and organizations on the council, as well as the owner of North Creek Nurseries, who is generously hosting this event to speak about the importance of native species. There are also many other groups across the state holding events today and throughout this week to celebrate Pennsylvania Native Species Day. There are too many to mention by name here, but they include state parks, preserves, nature centers, conservation societies and associations, master gardeners, and master watershed stewards. I'd like to thank them all for joining in this celebration of Pennsylvania's native species. Our first speaker today is our state plant regulatory official and the Chief of Plant Protection at the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, Dana Rhodes. Dana?
Thank you, Chris. Again, my name is Dana Rhodes. I'm with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and I'm glad to be here today. It's a beautiful day to be here, and I thank all of you for joining us. As Chris mentioned, we're here to celebrate Native Species Day, not only here at North Creek Nurseries, but across the Commonwealth. At the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture's Bureau of Plant Industry, our focus is on the health and well-being of the plants in our ecosystems, and native species play an extremely important role in that environment. Planting and nurturing native plants is the first step in being better stewards of land, and doing so is a big step forward in reinvigorating the strength of our natural world. Native plants are a haven for other native species in our environment, beginning with our native bees, butterflies, and other beneficial insects that help pollinate them. Through the efforts of pollinators, native plants produce the fruits and berries that feed native birds and animals and us, and who then spread those seeds to continue the cycle. The simple act of planting a native plant in the place of an invasive one bolsters our ecosystem and grows biodiversity, making a direct and impactful difference. Through intentional and engaged stewardship, we can better our environment, and that benefits everyone. But we could not do that without the knowledge and efforts of growers like North Creek Nursery. Their work ensures that we are taking the best care of the environment that we can. And as you can see, they do an amazing job. And they highlight our native plants for their customers. But for North Creek, it's not just about the plants they sell, but the conservation work they do well before they plant the seeds that grow into the beautiful plants around us. North Creek Nursery is one of only 2 SANC certified nurseries in Pennsylvania. SANC is the system's approach to nursery certification and is a national program that promotes the implementation of processes in nurseries and greenhouses to reduce the spread of invasive plants and insects by identifying and solving pest hazards at all stages in the plant production system. The steps they take mitigate the transmission of disease across the plants, reducing the use of pesticides, and ensure healthier plants for their customers and for the environment. I applaud North Creek Nursery for their efforts, and I thank them for being an engaged partner with the state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Agriculture, and the Governor's Invasive Species Council. It's my honor to introduce Susan Weaver, Environmental Program Manager for the Office of Water Programs at the Department of Environmental Protection. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Susan Weaver with the Pennsylvania DEP. I'd like to thank our host, North Creek Nurseries, for providing this beautiful location located in the White Clay Creek watershed. We're here today to celebrate and highlight the importance of supporting Pennsylvania's native species. Pennsylvania is home to a population of diverse native species, plants, insects, fish, birds, and mammals that originated thousands of years ago and thrive in mutual dependence. As an example, native bees, moths, and butterflies need native plants for nutrition that they can't get from non-native plants. Likewise, native plants need these insects to pollinate them. Our biodiverse ecosystem, based upon many native species, provides us with a range of benefits, including agricultural food production, timber, fisheries, and outdoor recreational experiences, as well as jobs and businesses that support these activities. Many scientists believe biodiversity is essential to the health of our water, land, and air, and therefore to our own lives. As humans and commerce have increasingly traversed the world, we unintentionally and intentionally brought non-native plants, insects, and animals with us. In areas where they have no natural predators, generalist species proliferate, crowding out native species and eliminating their food sources. For decades, most organizations, governments, industries, and backyard gardeners have paid little attention to the need for biodiversity and the mutual dependence of native species. Now there's a growing interest in making thoughtful choices and taking action to sustain native species in Pennsylvania. As invasive species proliferate, we encourage Pennsylvanians to plant local when possible, at home and in their communities, as native trees and plants are the foundation of a biodiverse ecosystem. At DEP, our Lake Erie aquatic biologists partner with other states and the province of Ontario to control the proliferation in the Great Lakes of aquatic invasive species like zebra and quagga mussels and sea lamprey. DEP's coastal resources staff are working on a trout habitat project for Lake Erie, which is a native species restoration initiative for lake trout. The project includes a design of trout spawning reefs and, if constructed, would provide habitat that had been largely lost due to fouling by zebra mussels. In south central Pennsylvania, our Waterways and Wetlands program makes support for American eel migration part of its permit requirements for the Muddy Run power plant on the Susquehanna River. As a result, the West Branch Susquehanna River and its tributaries have seen a dramatic increase in American eel populations in recent years. Because the eel is host for freshwater mussel species that filter pollutants out of the water quality is improving too. DEP is also working to support native plants. For example, our waterway construction permitting process now advises permittees to include native species and a management plan for non-native species in post-construction restoration or mitigation. DEP is working with 6 other state agencies and 14 organizations as part of the Governor's Invasive Species Council to identify threats from invasive species and what we can do to reduce invasives in Pennsylvania. The council launched the first Pennsylvania Native Species Day last year to help raise awareness. This year, we are delighted that dozens of state parks and organizations around the state are planting native species, removing invasives, or offering educational activities that you might join in. You might even come up with your own idea to celebrate and protect Pennsylvania's native species. You can find more information at www.nativespeciesday.pa.gov. Thank you. I would now like to introduce Rebecca Bowen, the Director of the Wild Resource Conservation Program at DCNR. Thank you.
Thanks. My name's Rebecca Bowen, and I'm with DCNR. I am the Wild Resource Conservation Director, and I'm also a member of the Bureau of Forestry, and I'm very glad to be here today to celebrate Pennsylvania native species. DCNR's Bureau of Forestry is charged with conserving our forests and native wild plants across the Commonwealth. Our mission includes managing 2.2 million acres of state forest land, being responsible for wildfires statewide, monitoring the health conditions, treating forest pests and diseases, providing technical assistance and education to the public and to our constituents in the Bureau of Forestry, and also the conservation of native wild plants. Pennsylvania is lucky enough to have a highly forested landscape throughout the state. It's very important to the people of Pennsylvania for wildlife habitat, recreation opportunities, wood products, ecosystem services like clean air and clean water, and refugia and corridors for plants and animals. Native species play a crucial role here. The Wild Resource Conservation Act directs DCNR to conserve and protect native plants in Pennsylvania. We actively work to conserve them by classifying plants as rare, threatened, or endangered and conserving them, promoting the use of native plantings in landscaping and restoration efforts, providing funding for restoration of native habitats along streams and converting lawns and turf grass to native meadows, restoration, recovery, and stewardship of Pennsylvania's rarest plant species, addressing invasive plant issues, promoting the research of native plant management and conservation questions, and the management of American ginseng and other plants that are vulnerable to decline because they are removed from the wild for personal or commercial use. I'd like to talk for a minute about the importance of native plants, of native species, in particular native plants. They form the backbone of a healthy ecosystem and overall biodiversity of an area. They provide food, shelter, and structure to all of the other members of the ecosystem. There are about 2,100 species of native plants in Pennsylvania, and they inhabit a wide range of habitats in the state, from dry to aquatic, rare to common, mountainous to stream bottoms. Native plants generally provide better nutrition to native wildlife with which they have evolved. An example is the glossy buckthorn berries that are not a very good food source for birds. They're low in protein and high in carbohydrates and can cause digestive problems in some animals. For smaller birds, this can actually lead to dehydration and can even result in death. Many species of native pollinators have co-evolved with native plants, and they depend on each other for survival, and many are host-specific, using only one species for a certain stage in their life cycle. An example is the zebra swallowtail on pawpaw and giant swallowtail on prickly ash. According to Douglas Tallama's book, Bringing Nature Home, in 2007, ash trees host 150 species of native moth and butterfly larvae, and we know that the emerald ash borer has negatively affected ash species. Unfortunately, we all know the forests and native plants of Pennsylvania are facing threats, such as emerald ash borer and other pests, damaging wildfires, changing habitat due to climate change. Invasive plants are fast-growing and can outcompete natives, and these things can impact native species in our forests and our communities. They can reduce habitat quality for native wildlife, and additionally, we're now hearing about challenges where people are facing problems even finding native plants to restore their areas. Nursery stock availability is difficult to find, and it's hard to find the native species that they're looking for. But on the bright side, it's heartening to see so many people here today who are excited about native species. It's exciting to see the good work of promoting native species here at the North Creek Nursery, and to hear about the great initiatives by the Invasive Species Council and our agency partners. It's exciting to see people actually excited about the future of native species and looking for ways to promote them and share them in their day-to-day work. I thank you for the opportunity to share our perspectives for today on native species and to participate in today's celebration. And now I would like to turn it over to Bob Cassis, Director of Policy, Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Bob Cassis. I'm the Director of Policy and Planning for the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. Thank you for the opportunity for our agency to be here to share Native Species Day, as well as to North Creek Nurseries. It's fantastic property. At the Fish and Boat Commission, our mission is to protect, conserve, and enhance the Commonwealth's aquatic resources, as well as provide fishing and boating opportunities for Commonwealth citizens, as well as non-citizens. And to accomplish that mission, we recognize that our precious native species work together in balance. So why is protecting and celebrating native species important to the Fish and Boat Commission? Well, all native species work together in balance. And what do I mean by that? Well, native plants and trees that grow along our waterways, they provide nutrients and habitat to aquatic insects and macroinvertebrates. And what that does is that forms the food chain for our native fish, reptiles, and amphibians. And native aquatic plants, they do grow seasonally, and they do provide protection and spawning habitat for those species that I just mentioned. But what happens when invasive species take over the natural system in and of itself? Well, it does disrupt the system. Invasive plants, they drop leaves into our waterways, and what that does is that creates almost a junk food in the system for those same species. They don't get the same nutrients that native species would be providing at that same time. Also, invasive fish, reptiles, amphibians, they can outcompete our native species for habitat, for those nutrients at the same time, again, making it more difficult for our naturalized species here to compete. And overall, that balance in the system is disrupted. Now, we were honored last year to host this event on our headquarters property, and around that same time, we celebrated a large-scale stream bank restoration project in our backyard. And what that did is it reduced erosion and it cut down the amount of sediment that flows into the Susquehanna River, eventually getting into the Chesapeake Bay, which is reducing that load by tens of millions of pounds. And I'm pleased today to say that area has been transformed into a wildlife corridor for white-tailed deer. It provides hunting grounds for birds of prey. Before, it was a raging chocolate milk river from erosion that would go down during a rainstorm. Now it's ripe, clean water that flows through that property. And it does feature hundreds of newly planted native plants, shrubs, and trees on the property. I'm proud to say that we continue our partnerships with other state agencies, DCNR, PennDOT, Game Commission, DEP, local municipalities, private landowners, nonprofit partners, to accomplish those similar results here as far as stream bank restoration and habitat enhancement goes throughout the Commonwealth. In conclusion, I'd like to thank again North Creek Nurseries as well as all the parties here for having us here. On behalf of the Fish and Boat Commission, we do look forward to future partnerships with everybody to collectively celebrate our native species. It's my pleasure now to introduce John Fleming with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation.
Thanks, sir. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it very much. Boy, you really can't beat today. I mean, look at where we are and the weather we have. Really harkens me back to the early days of my professional careers when I worked on a nursery. It's a very, very nice nursery that you have. My name is John Fleming. I'm the Chief Executive Director for the Highway Admin Department at PennDOT. And while you may not think as PennDOT as, you think more of PennDOT as roads and bridges, we're also incredibly familiar with managing the non-native and invasive species and plants that have such explosive growth rates and are detrimental to the impacts of both our wildlife and also our vegetation. Most people don't think typically about how highways move themselves, but highways are also very critical for moving invasive species and weed seeds and things of that nature up and along and down through our corridors. As a result, in the last year, PennDOT had invested about $43 million in vegetation management in an effort to control these unnative and invasive weed species over our 40,000 miles of highway network system. Ecosystem health really requires a holistic approach. PennDOT uses an integrated vegetation management approach to promote our healthy and native vegetation while discouraging that proliferation of invasive and non-native plants. Recently, PennDOT updated all of our seed mixes to better reflect the native life in Pennsylvania, as well as reduce the invasive non-native plants like crown vetch and other type plant material that outcompete other plants in our environment. There's also an invasive species control element to everything we do with our vegetation, whether or not that be modifying our mowing schedules to reach non-invasive species before their seeds disperse, or targeting specific species through our programs for removal and control. But it's not just us. It's all of the departments, the folks that are standing here beside me today, that also have a role in protecting the environment and for our future generations. In addition, PennDOT also has Adopt and Beautify and Keystone Pollinator Habitat programs that are available and sponsored through PennDOT for private and volunteer organizations to come through, and volunteers to come in and make these differences in their communities and also help assist within the right-of-ways of our state highway network system. So we do appreciate everybody coming today, and also being invited to today's native species, of which I will then turn over to Scott Bear, the Habitat Planning and Development Division Chief for the Pennsylvania Game Commission.
Thanks, John. Good morning, everybody. What a beautiful day for Native Species Day, right? Thank you so much for having me here. Again, my name is Scott Bear, Division Chief of Habitat Planning and Development for the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And yeah, it's just great just standing back there listening to all of our native species. There's a few non-natives mixed in there too, but just a glorious morning. So I wanted to start by just mentioning the Pennsylvania Game Commission's mission. There's really kind of two parts to our mission. The first part is talking about wildlife and their habitats, to manage and protect Pennsylvania's wildlife and their habitats. And the Pennsylvania Game Commission, our mantra is, we have 480 species of birds and mammals that are under kind of our purview, and we spend significant resources, financial, our personnel. We have staff all across the state working continuously to maintain and manage the health and resilience and long-term sustainability of all 480 species of our birds and mammals. In addition, we are partnering with Fish and Boat and DCNR, with Rebecca and Bob's agencies, to do all kinds of work for their habitats and their species that they're jurisdiction over. So a lot of partnerships happening with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and we are constantly focused on that first part of our mission to manage and protect Pennsylvania's wildlife and their habitats. Now, there's a second part of our mission, too, that really gets at the people component of it. Of course, there's a focus in our agency for maintaining the long-term integrity of hunting and trapping and those sports. But there's also a big movement in the Pennsylvania Game Commission right now to talk about non-game and those non-commercial activities, the bird watching, the hawk watching, things like that. And you're going to see a big push from our agency over the coming years to do a lot more work and spend a lot more resources on those activities. So, of course, all of that is at its core focused on native species and their habitats, ecosystem health, ecosystem resilience over the long term. So, focusing in on that second part of our mission with the people and trying to make available all resources, we just thank you all for your interest in native species, and thank you for helping us achieve our mission to maintain the long-term health and integrity of those systems. We put a lot of resources in managing them for that native health and resilience, and it is a constant battle out there. And so folks, if they can participate in maintaining that health and resilience, we certainly appreciate it. So thank you all for your interest in Native Species Day, and thank you for playing a role in maintaining habitat health. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Rob McHale, the president of the Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association.
Good morning, everyone. Have the distinct pleasure to be standing at North Creek Nurseries, the world headquarters of North Creek Nurseries, which a lot of you didn't understand when you came here. It's right on the sign out front. I'm Rob McHale again. I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association. PLNA represents nurseries, greenhouses, landscape contractors, and retail garden centers throughout Pennsylvania's $6.8 billion green industry. In my day job, I'm the national sales manager for Michelle's, which has been in business since 1890 in Pennsylvania and happens to be the oldest plant distribution company in the country. We're in our 5th generation. 6th generation was just born about 6 weeks ago, so it's a really old company in the industry in Pennsylvania. I'd like to thank the Department of Agriculture Environmental Protection, and the Governor's Invasive Species Council for organizing this event for the Pennsylvania Native Species Day. I'd also like to thank Steve Castorani, the president of North Creek Nurseries, and his staff, especially his staff, for getting this property ready. I can guarantee you that if you would have came here a week ago, it would look just as amazing as it does today, because they do such a fantastic job. So thank you to everyone that helped out with that. North Creek has been, for years, the industry's premier breeder, propagator, and marketer of Northeast and Mid-Atlantic herbaceous native plants. In addition to producing a myriad of native plant species, North Creek has been the leader in carrying out their business with an eye towards protecting water quality in their watershed, integrating their practices with the environment. I'm sure that Steve will have more to say about that, but obviously North Creek has been leading the charge on that in the entire country. One of PLNA's first partnerships was to encourage the use of Pennsylvania native plants was back in 2000, when PLNA worked with DCNR to create a brochure that crosswalked potentially invasive garden plants with native plant alternatives. The brochure has been updated several times since then and is now available and exists on their website. PLNA began our journey as an association along the path of encouraging the industry to reduce and eliminate harmful invasive plant species from our fields and our catalogs. And in 2002, the PLNA Board of Directors adopted the St. Louis Declaration. The St. Louis Declaration came out of a meeting in 2001 involving our industry, botanical gardens, academics, and government. This meeting produced codes of conduct for each sector involved. PLNA has adopted this code for the nursery industry and has promoted the use to our members. Shortly after adopting the St. Louis Declaration Code of Conduct, PLNA became a charter member for the Governor's Invasive Species Council and has been an active partner in their activities ever since. When the Department of Agriculture decided to update Pennsylvania's noxious weed law, PLNA worked with the department over several years to update the law to be a more effective tool to control invasive plants, noxious weeds, and other non-native plants. PLNA is a charter member of the Controlled Plant and Noxious Weed Committee and has been a consistent voice in helping move our industry away from plants that cause environmental harm to our ecosystems in Pennsylvania. Thanks for the opportunity to tell PLNA's story when it comes to encourage the use of native plants and helping eliminate invasive species in our state. And with that, I'd like to introduce my friend and former colleague, Steve Castorani from North Creek Nurseries.
Good morning, everyone. Beautiful day, huh? Couldn't ask for a nicer day today. Thank you, Rob, and the Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association for recommending us as the host of this year's event. Would also like to welcome all the agencies represented here today that are making the second annual Native Species Day celebration possible. And thanks for all those wonderful comments and all the information that you shared with our guests here. Welcome our friends, business associations, and co-workers. I also want to give a shout out to the dedicated staff that helped to prepare, organize today's event. Thank you all for all that you do. It's an honor for our nursery to be hosting the second annual Pennsylvania Native Species Day. We are here today to raise awareness and recognize the importance of native species and the biodiversity they bring to our world. My hope is that this increased awareness will encourage all of us to protect native species and become stewards of the environment. 35 years ago, when we founded the nursery, native plants were hardly recognized by the public. We became native plant pioneers who tried to promote plants that added value beyond their aesthetic. There was little awareness of the significant role native plants play in enhancing biodiversity for all species and how they contribute to and supply ecosystem services. They are the building block of the food web and the foundation of life on Earth. At North Creek, we are committed to incorporating ecosystem services and sustainability into horticultural practices. Our team is dedicated to bridging the gap between horticulture and ecology. Sustaining native species is profoundly important both regionally and nationally. We aim to preserve biodiversity for future benefit. Education and action on behalf of the Governor's Invasive Species Councils surrounding these issues should also be applauded. Our mission is to propagate and market plants that develop the relationship between people and sustainable outdoor environments. We supply our customers with regionally appropriate species selections of native plants that help alleviate the burden of climate change, foster pollinators, and bird interactions. Adding beauty to our gardens, they deliver vegetative solutions for stormwater management, as well provide ecosystem services while promoting education, sustainability, and conservation. 6 major watersheds run through Pennsylvania. Southeastern Pennsylvania belongs to the Delaware watershed, and at a hyperlocal level, here in the White Clay Creek watershed. We are currently standing between the middle branch and the west branch of the White Clay Creek. The headwaters, just behind you, flow into Pennsylvania's first wild and scenic waterway. Being aware of our sense of place is important and encourages us to be good stewards of our environment. Our tagline, "Where horticulture meets ecology," is rooted in the ecosystem of where we come from. Our plants are the keystone of what we build and how we can grow together to encourage an environment of continuous learning. Help us raise awareness by discovering the power of native plants. Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us here today.
I'd like to thank everyone once again for being here, for all our speakers, and are there any questions? Yes.
How can Pennsylvania's public learn more about and find information about welcoming pollinators and native birds and animals and plants to their properties at home?
Would any of our speakers like to answer that question?
So I'm with DCNR. There's a lot of information on the DCNR website on brochures for plantings in different kinds of settings, like sunny, dry, or sunny, wet, or shady, dry, and shady, wet. And there's also some information about whether or not they attract birds, and species to avoid planting, the ones that could potentially become invasive. And I can see Scott was going to step up too. So
Do you want to talk about, is the pollinator thing still going on?
the pollinator protection plan.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure how much is on the web.
Okay, all right. So it's a great question and a really important one. So with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we have 1.5 million acres of state game lands, which is roughly approximately the size of the state of Delaware. Those are just our game lands alone. Then we have approximately 2 million acres of private lands that are enrolled in what we call our Hunter Access Private Landowner Program. There are opportunities that we are currently developing right now to really expand not only the really important pollinator habitat work that we're doing on our game lands, and I encourage you all to go out and visit the game lands if you haven't already and see I'm sure your local game land has a lot of really good pollinator work that's happening. and you can speak with the local land managers to learn about what seed mixes they're using, what how they're fighting invasive species, that type of thing. But we are beginning a private lands initiative that would create opportunities. So what I would say, I'll just leave it as stay tuned for more on the Pennsylvania Game Commission's perspective. But we may be creating opportunities for private landowners. What else? There's also, I'll just mention, there's also, NRCS and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service also have programs where they are trying to get information out to private landowners on, like Rebecca had mentioned, what is your soil type, what kind of plants does your the area that you want to move into a pollinator garden have already, and that'll give you some context of what the appropriate seed mix might look like. So I'll promote their going that direction as well. With NRCS, there are Farm Bill funded programs. So depending on how many acres you have, you could enroll them into things like EQIP, which is EQIP. It is the acronym for those federal programs that also have funding available. We can talk more if you'd like, but that is a general answer.
And as Scott was talking, I was thinking more. So we're also, I forget who all is a member of it, so forgive me if I get it wrong. But many state agencies are partners in the Pollinator Partnership Protection Plan. Yep. P4, I think they call it. And there is information for landowners about what kind of species might be good to attract pollinators. And then also something that DCNR Bureau of Forestry has is the Rural and Community Forestry Program has a turf to meadow program where there's a lot of information specifically for people who have land that is in grass that they want it to be in some kind of a more natural setting, a meadow. If you're interested in pollinators, that's the kind of thing that they can help you out with. So I have a card. I can share it with you if you'd like. But there is some information on the website, or just give me a call and I can direct you to the right person.
Are there any other questions? All right, terrific. Well, thanks again for everyone for being here today. Thank you.
I just wanted to see how much you...
By invasive species. We have leaders here today from agencies and organizations on the council, as well as the owner of North Creek Nurseries, who is generously hosting this event to speak about the importance of native species.
Nurturing native plants is the first step in being better stewards of land, and doing so is a big step forward in reinvigorating the strength of our natural world. Native plants are a haven for...
As an example, native bees, moths, and butterflies need native plants for nutrition that they can't get from non-native plants. Likewise,
Here today to celebrate Pennsylvania native species. DCNR's Bureau of Forestry is charged with conserving our forests and native wild plants across the Commonwealth. Our mission includes managing 2.2 million acres of state forest land, being responsible
as well as to North Creek Nurseries. It's fantastic property. Yeah, at the Fish and Boat Commission, our mission is to conserve, protect, conserve, and enhance the Commonwealth's aquatic resources, as well as provide fishing and boating opportunities.
With managing the non-native and invasive species and plants that have such explosive growth rates and are detrimental to the impacts of both our wildlife and also our vegetation.
Few non-natives mixed in there too, but just a glorious morning. So I wanted to start by just mentioning the Pennsylvania Game Commission's mission.
PLNA represents nurseries, greenhouses, landscape contractors, and retail garden centers throughout Pennsylvania's $6.8 billion green industry.
In my Species Day celebration possible, and thanks for all those wonderful comments and all the information that you shared with our guests here. Welcome our friends, business associations.
Oh, okay. I felt it.
I want to get a sense of how much time you have, first of all, and what would you like to focus? Tissue culture division, and we produce in the neighborhood of 8 million plants a year. We distribute, help revegetate a lot of the highways and stream corridors through Pennsylvania, through a lot of other states joining us. A very large ash tree over here and one here, and you can see how impactful it was on the oak tree. So we talked about ashes and ascertaining decline, and the invasive species are the first colonizers. So we look at plants that could stand alone or actually can be a little.
I would say around 500 different species of different plants in these beds. Each of them have a story. They're grouped by application and by where they come from, different relationships that we have within the